Hi, and welcome to Matt Holman Talks Mental Health, the podcast where I have the opportunity to sit down and chat to amazing humans about their journeys with mental health. For this episode, I'm so happy to welcome Holly to the conversation. Welcome, Holly.
Hi.
Hi, lovely to see you.
Yeah, you too.
So, as I will always do, just a quick introduction to how Holly and I know each other. And then, Holly, I'll let you do a proper introduction, let people know all about you, what you're doing. But Holly actually was a attendee at a mental health first aid training course that I delivered, gosh, back in 2019, February of 2019, actually. It's really fascinating because since I met Holly back all those few years ago, I've been telling a story about a part of a journey that one of my delegates had mentioned during the training. And I couldn't remember exactly which delegate it was. Unfortunately, that's really poor, isn't it? But as we did the prep for this conversation, all of a sudden it became apparent Holly was the person that I keep talking about in every training session. So I'm so excited to come back and have another conversation with you, Holly. And thank you for joining me. I won't say anything else. I'm not going to talk about the conversation that we had. But
Okay.
introduce yourself, please. Tell people.
Oh, well, it's lovely to see you too. So as you know, I came and did the training with you back in, I think it was 2018, 2019,
19,
something
yeah.
like that. We worked out, didn't we? Yeah, for a couple of reasons, because I'd been on my own mental health journey and because I wanted to know how to support my colleagues and my friends on their mental health journeys. I think mental health was something that was becoming sort of more talked about. And I was discovering that more and more of my friends had gone through similar journeys to me, and I just wanted to learn some better skills of how to manage those conversations.
Yep.
I think there's a bit of fear around starting the conversation and getting it wrong. Um, and yet we've discussed that all that really happens if you start the conversation and it's not the right time is that your friend thinks that you care about them. So
Yeah.
that was how I came to the training. And then since then have gone on and trained to become a trainer myself, and I'm now delivering mental health first aid in Bristol to my colleagues in the festival and events industry.
Brilliant. Oh, I love it. And we'll come to that. We'll get to that point, I
Yeah.
hope, and that sort of journey that you've been on. And I love it. I love the thought, somebody comes along to one of the trainings and then does something with it and takes their own steps forward. So amazing stuff. So big supporter of that, Holly. But the big piece of this is the journey, your journey with mental health and your story. And I'm going to sit here and I'm going to smile all the way through this, I'm sure, in a nice way. I mean that in the nicest possible way, because I know your story. I know some of it anyway. And what I remember of it and say to others is just incredible. So I'm going to let you tell your story, please, Holly.
Wow. Okay. Well, where to start, really? I think I always was conscious that there was something a bit different about me when I was a child, and with reflection now, sort of now years after a diagnosis, when I've talked to my mum about it, she said that she probably noticed things were slightly different when I was about 4 or 5 years old.
Right.
But there were so many things going on at home. My sister was very poorly. She was born um, really very sick when she was born. She was in hospital for a long time, and then my parents split up at the same time, and my mum and myself and my two sisters, we were made homeless, so we were in a homeless hostel. So there were a lot of things kind of covering up or things that could be attributed to why I was behaving slightly differently or perhaps acting out, or there was a lot of quite obvious trauma going on within the family. And so I think it wasn't picked up that I perhaps was struggling mentally, because it was just seen in the wider context of the trauma that the family was going through anyway. And so it wasn't until I was about 9, I think, that my mum, life had settled down at home. We were living in a nice house. My sister was doing really well. She had started school against all the odds. She was doing really well. My middle sister also doing really well. And I think then it became really apparent that things were not good at all. I was seeing people that weren't there. I was hearing voices. So I was having auditory and visual hallucinations. I used to have to climb out of my body every night and glide out the window and join the dead people and take them up the road to the light, which you can imagine as a 9-year-old is quite terrifying, actually. I didn't actually tell anybody that that's what was going on, but the effects of those sort of experiences, those hallucinations and delusions, started to affect my school life. And so I got taken out of school for a couple of weeks and sent to my grandma, who was a nurse, for a bit of R&R, which involved a lot of afternoon naps and hot chocolate. She lived by the beach, and she and my granddad, they were really kind to me. And I have a photo of her and me standing on the doorstep during that visit, and it's quite shocking to look at. Like my eyes are just black underneath, and I look like this little shell of a child. I look really quite ill. And I think we just sort of, because we were separated from my dad, we didn't really know about the mental health conditions that were in dad's side of the family, because they were only emerging then as well. So we now know that there's a genetically linked diagnosis of bipolar and psychosis that runs through 3 generations and is possibly running into the 4th at the moment of my family. Right. But we didn't know that. You know, my parents were in their late 20s when they separated, and it was sort of early days for the other members of the family's diagnosis. So life plodded on, and it wasn't really until I got into my teens that things really, really got super bad. And I was experiencing quite regular episodes of psychosis, and I was away at boarding school, and I think I just walked out of a lesson one day, just literally walked out, didn't tell anybody anything, got on a train and came home, which was a couple of hours journey. And my mum thought I was just playing truant, was just sort of, you know, acting up. And so she just took me back to school. And I think the school realised that things were really, really not right. You know, I was having conversations with Jesus, and I really was not well at all. And they took me to my GP. I had a GP at school who was a very nice man, but who was quite old school, and said probably what I needed to do was to have a baby. That would sort me out. I know.
Random. How old were you?
I was 15. It's like, well, you know, probably if you were a little bit older, we'd recommend you had a baby. That would probably that. And I was like, okay, but I'm 15 and at school. He was like, so we're going to prescribe some Prozac instead.
That's incredible.
I know. Can you imagine a GP saying that now? These are different times. So prescribed Prozac, which made the psychosis worse. And then referred me to mental health services, and it ended up with me being picked up by the police after an episode at a psychiatrist who he just kept asking the same question, like, how often does your mum come and visit? And I kept trying to explain to him that my mum wasn't allowed to come and visit at boarding school. Like, there were really strict rules around what could happen. And he just kept asking the same question over and over. And so I walked out. I was quite good at walking away from things. And the police picked me up and took me back to school because they thought I was a risk to myself. And I think that was when people really started to say, well, actually, there's something a bit deeper going on. This isn't just a teenager playing up. So I was put on antidepressants. From that age, I was changed to Seroxat, which we now know in under 18s has a link with self-harming, an increased risk of self-harming. And I started self-harming almost straight away as soon as I went onto it. But at the time, the options for drugs were quite limited. Really don't remember there being much more than Prozac or Seroxat, really. So apart from, you know, the sort of carbamazepines of the real old, you know, it was during the 90s, a change in the understandings of medicine. So I just sort of bounced around through my A-levels, didn't do very well, having done really well at GCSE level, which is a shame. Dropped out of university, went travelling, kind of ran away from it all, really. Got back from travelling and decided to enrol back at university. So things were kind of stable-ish. Went back to university, was self-harming quite badly by that point. Had to go to A&E a few times to have treatment for different sort of cuts and injuries that I'd caused myself. And at university, the wheels really came off. The pressure of the change of, you know, not, it was just such a change, and there was so little structure, and there wasn't really, in the first year, there wasn't actually that much to do.
Right.
And I had gone from this quite sort of ordered, structured, I had a job, I had a mortgage, I had all of these things,
Right.
to then I was in my early 20s by that point, so I was a little bit late to university. To suddenly have none of that, and to be, oh God, you've got like, you know, 1 40-minute lecture, and then you've got nothing until the next day, and
Right.
I don't really know anybody, and it caused quite a shift in my mental health. And I had been given a diagnosis in 1998, but I didn't agree with it. And I didn't agree with it because my mum was, well, it sounds awful, my mum, she had always described people as with manic depression as kind of old man alcoholics.
Right.
And that was the diagnosis I was given, and so I didn't accept it. And our friend's daughter had committed suicide, and so she, feeling frightened by that, I think, had always told us that suicide was a really selfish thing to do, and she'd be very angry with us if we ever did it. And I can see now that really came from a place of fear, but it was quite difficult to then talk to her about how I was. So yeah, when I was at university, I tried to take my own life, and finally, I think through that, you know, I tried to get sectioned. I tried to ask the GP to section me, and they wouldn't. And I went home, and I was in a really, really bad way. And my mum, I think, realised that it wasn't just me misbehaving, that there was something wrong. She couldn't get me sectioned either. I wasn't sick enough, unbelievably. And so I got booked into a branch of the Priory for 3 days. And they just sedated me basically for 3 days. Yeah, I feel like I've waffled loads.
Carry on.
Yeah.
This is what it's about. So you
okay, sure?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Okay.
It's your story.
Yeah, so from there things really picked up. I went back to university, and pretty quickly realized that I wasn't well enough to continue at university, so I pulled out. I withdrew, and I was really lucky that my GP was a German gentleman, and I wish I could find out who he was, because I would say he saved my life.
Right.
And I'm not sure whether he'd still be practicing now, but I'd love to thank him for it, because it was him who changed my mind about the diagnosis. And he realized that I was studying human biology at university I had wanted to be a doctor, but I had sort of downgraded what I thought I could cope with. And so eventually I decided to teach biology. So I was learning how to teach that at university. And he realized like that was the way into helping me manage the diagnosis and learning to live with this condition, was to go in through the sort of scientific angle. And we lived in Oxford. So I was at Oxford Brookes University, but Oxford, the proper Oxford University, has a link to the mental health hospital in Oxford, and they run their clinical trials there. So when he gave me the diagnosis, he also linked me up to a whole series of clinical trials that were going on, which was amazing.
Oh, right.
Absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
So I took part in the very first mindfulness trial, when they were bringing mindfulness a mindfulness program over from America to see whether they could use that as a treatment option on the NHS. I took part in that. I took part in studies where I had like electrodes in my head, electrodes on my eyelids. I've been in and out of like MRI scanners for all sorts of different things. I went on a drugs trial, and it was fundamental to me accepting that I was poorly. I was still very ill. It leads us nicely to your Barcelona story that you tell in your training. This was the time.
Yeah, oh, I love it. I was wondering when it was coming. I was like,
this was the time.
Yeah,
so despite being on a really quite hefty raft of drugs. They didn't really work. And apparently in women that can be more common. I've learned as things have gone on, that they're not necessarily as effective in women, because a lot of the old drug trials were done on men, and they've not factored in like the hormonal changes in women, and the different sort of body fat ratios and things like that. So yeah, one rather crazy night, I suddenly decided that I really needed to have coffee and breakfast in Barcelona. Like, who doesn't do that? That seemed totally rational to me at the time.
I love it.
And there was a bus called the Oxford Tube that ran from between Oxford and London in the daytime, like every sort of 10 minutes or something crazy. And at night time it ran like once every hour or once every couple of hours. So I hopped on the Oxford Tube and I went to London, and I went to the airport and I booked a flight, and I went to Barcelona for breakfast. Like, yeah,
it's incredible.
Thankfully I found my way home. I've since learned that my uncle, who also has bipolar, had a very similar experience in Greece, where he took himself off to Greece, and he ended up in prison in Greece. He went on a very big manic episode, and ended up with some fishermen, and they were, I'm not sure that they were really fishermen, let's put it that way. They were using explosives to do stuff out at sea. Yeah, he had to be brought home. He was rescue packaged home. So apparently it runs in the family to run off to sunny climes. Who knew?
That's it. I always think it's a whole new level of cost to that, isn't it?
Well, the coffee was so good out there.
I'm sure it was, but how incredible. I you know what, and it is that story that I always share with people, and I just find it fascinating, to hear you talking about it again, after hearing it three years ago or whatever it was when you told me first time, and it's ingrained in my brain, that story.
I see.
Yeah.
It sounds funny. There's harder sides to it. I was in my 20s and I had to declare bankruptcy. Because I wasn't working, I wasn't earning, and unfortunately when I'd gone traveling, I hadn't paid national insurance, and so I had this gap in my national insurance record, and which meant that I didn't qualify for any state benefits. So I was trying to support myself financially whilst also not earning, and I really tried to keep doing that, and I kept sort of bouncing the money round different places, different credit cards. And eventually it was my GP, the lovely German GP, who got the Citizens Advice Bureau into the doctor's surgery, and he said, we have to reduce the stress in your life, and the money is the one that I can help you with, and therefore let's look at how we can do that. And I think I was about £27,000 in debt at that point, which in the early 2000s was a lot of money. A lot of money, and that was a horrible process to go through, but again, it really helped to reduce the stress and kind of reset things of how I could then start getting better.
And you did.
And yes, I mean, I still have good days and bad days, and but I have a lot better understanding of how to manage the condition. And I think that's the thing with mental health, isn't it? It's not curable always, but it's treatable. And it's about learning how to work to your strengths and not beat yourself up about your weaknesses.
It's so true, isn't it? And I think, we had a conversation before we recorded this about sort of adjustments that we have to make sometimes to, to manage our mental health in the way that we do it, whether that's increasing our well-being, the activities we do, maybe it's being kinder to ourselves sometimes a little bit as well.
So much that. Be kind is my motto in life.
Like, is it?
You wouldn't treat your friend the way that we treat ourselves, would we? I mean, it's
true.
The friend would tell you to go away, or they wouldn't hang around with you for 30, 40, 50 years, would they, if you treated them as hardly as I think humans are hardwired to treat themselves much more harshly than they would treat other people. And it's a tricky thing to learn. I found it a tricky thing to learn, to be kind to yourself, and it's okay to stop and rest, and you're not being lazy, you're being sensible.
and your dog's just agreeing with you there.
I
Absolutely.
know my neighbour's asking if he wants to come outside. I'm sorry.
Oh right, no, don't worry. You know what? We're in this beautiful world now where we can't just shut ourselves away, can we? There's lots of other things.
Oh, I'm so lucky. I live in a community,
Yeah.
traveller community, and everybody looks after each other. And
Amazing.
yeah, my neighbour is an absolute legend. He looks after my dog. He cooks for some of the older people on site. He's one of life's good ones.
Oh, that's good. That's good to be surrounded by the right people as well, right? So,
Yeah,
and that's important. So in terms of that recovery journey, then from so sort of late 20s, I guess, sort of was when it really started changing. Is that fair to say?
yeah, sort of mid. Yeah, I think it was like 23, 24 at that point.
So what did you implement at those points to sort of come forward and get yourself into a much better place? What was going on?
I started working, and I was working 5 days a week for a lovely American medical company. And the 5 days a week, like, I got promoted at work,
Okay.
which was really, really nice. I was really pleased about that, but it just caused quite a big relapse. And so from that point on, I was lying in bed one morning on a Saturday, and I realized that I had nearly 6 months' wages in the bank, and I was too broken to go and spend them on anything. I couldn't get out of bed at the weekends. All I did was sleep at the weekends.
Right.
And I just realized that if things were this bad in my 20s and I didn't do something about it, I probably wasn't going to make it to my 30s or my 40s. And so I made a really conscious decision that I vividly remember that day of lying in bed and just going, I've got to change something, or I'm not going to survive. And so from that day on, I stopped working full time.
Right. Yep.
I think I felt that it was lazy not to work full time. I think I hadn't accepted that, a mental health condition, it's not your fault. Like, you got to manage it, otherwise you can't function. And so it was quite a big shift internally of, okay, well, I can't ignore this anymore. I've got to do something about it. So I stopped working full time. I went to 4 days a week, and I've maintained that. And I started to look at the sort of work I wanted to do, and I volunteered at a festival, and that was when everything changed. I suddenly discovered my tribe, and I was like, this is where I need to be. And so I quit my job.
Yep.
And that's where everything really started to get better.
Brilliant. And you say you found your tribe. I like that.
Yeah, everybody needs a tribe to thrive. Yeah. That's my motto.
Tribe. I love that. I'm writing that down.
I think it's like the old sort of, like the old Neanderthal days when you had your tribe, didn't you? And or they say that thing about, like, you need a village to raise a child. I think as adults, like, we need our tribe around us to keep us well, keep us happy,
but also to pick us up when we're struggling, don't you think?
Yeah.
And I think that's
very much.
I think about my own. That's right. Yeah, you go ahead. I'll carry on talking for
at the door. 2 seconds.
No worries at all. No worries at all. So Holly's just gone to let her dog out. For anybody that is listening, wondering why she stopped talking. That's all right. She's back. She's back now.
Sorry.
That's all right. For those that are watching, they'll see what's going on. For those that are listening, I just padded there with I should have put an advert in there, shouldn't I? Really? Although this is not. There's no advertising in here. Should have advertised your business, your Welly Life stuff. But it's interesting, isn't it? So when I think about when I was struggling, what I needed around me was support to pick me up, not to run to the hills. And it is a tester, isn't it, for lots of relationships around who's there to support you, and then you return that favor and that support. The lovely thing at the moment, Holly, is that there's sun on you, and it looks like you're wearing this like rainbow colored lipstick. It's amazing. It looks incredible. Again, not very helpful for anybody that's listening to this podcast, but it did look incredible. But so in terms of that tribe, that community, those people around you, so how have you maintained that? Because obviously the events aren't happening like every day of the year forever.
No.
How have you continued to maintain that for yourself?
Oh, well, I've been really lucky, actually. I started volunteering at festivals, and that creates quite a sort of quite a supportive community. That community of people volunteering is lovely. They move from event to event, and so I guess my friendship base changed to incorporate more of those people. I also started to live within the traveller community. And that in itself creates a really nice community. It's quite a tight-knit community. And so even on my worst days at home, I have to walk through sight to go to the bathroom, and you'll inevitably bump into somebody.
Okay.
And I think one of the hardest things when you're feeling not mentally well is to reach out. And people always say, don't they, like, oh, if you're not feeling well, reach out to me. And like,
Yeah.
it's one of the hardest things to do when you're not feeling well. But if you have to bump into people and they know you and they know you well, and they see that you're not quite your normal self, then those supportive conversations around how you're doing, they happen a bit more sort of naturally.
Brilliant.
So that was one way. And then the other way is work. Is coming back to starting doing the mental health training with you, and starting teaching it myself, to just widen the conversation within my tribe of, lots of us are struggling with these things. And we look after each other all summer because we're in a field together for months and months at a time, moving from event to event. But how do we look after each other over the winter? How do we start those conversations? How do we keep ourselves feeling well over winter?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a difficult one, isn't it? A challenge at times to make sure you maintain that, and it just takes a small bit of effort at times, doesn't it? So that's the important part of those support networks around us as well.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
Brilliant. I appreciate that. We are coming towards the end of the recording, believe it or not. We've been talking.
Really?
We've been talking for well over 26 minutes now. So
oh my goodness,
it's incredible, isn't it? It just goes so quickly. So I'm going to throw it back to you just for the last few thoughts through what you're planning, what you want to do with where you are, and things like that. So the future for you. But just want to say from me to you, it's an absolute pleasure to see you, and I'm so happy that we got together and did this recording.
It's so nice to see you again.
Years. I know. I would say I've gone grey, but I was already grey, I think, when I did it back in 2019.
I've got longer. Yeah,
I don't know. Something's always changed, isn't it? Yeah. So maybe my beard's gone a bit darker. But
I would like to say thank you to you. Thank you for helping me along this journey. Like the training that I did with you was absolutely. It was the beginning of the journey that I'm on now, and I'm so grateful, for giving me the skills to start. So yeah, thank you. Please don't ever stop what you're doing.
Oh gosh,
it's a wonderful thing. Thank you.
I feel a bit tired at times, but I keep going, and it's these conversations. These conversations are the reason why we get up and we do what we do, because we have to. I'm going to throw it to you though, Holly, for any final thoughts you want to share and what you want to do. So over to you.
Oh wow, that's a big question.
It is,
well,
isn't it? Yeah.
Where do we go from here? I mean, my journey at the moment is like yours, is spreading the word about how do we talk about mental health, how do we reduce the stigma. And I think my long-term goal is to improve the welfare of the people who are in my industry. I can't change the world much as I'd like to. Hello, bipolar.
We'll temper that one down just a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll start at the country level.
About that off camera, didn't we?
Start an individual country, just the UK.
One day. But I think my ultimate goal at the moment with the project that I'm doing with the festivals is to start the conversation about how do we have a best practice within our industry of looking after each other. So that's where I'm heading. Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed, absolutely. But you're right, it does need a bit more consistency and best practice to it, doesn't it? So that everybody gets the same fair and equal sort of support mechanism around that.
We're great at looking after the public at events, and we just haven't caught up with looking after ourselves yet. We're getting there.
No, absolutely. And you know what? The more conversations we open, the more things that we talk about, the more awareness we raise, then you expect it to sort of change over time anyway, right? So
exactly,
it's never going to be like today it's this and tomorrow it's totally different. It will take time. But with amazing people like you, Holly, around it and supporting it and pushing it and promoting it, it's going to change. It will.
Oh, bless you. Thank you. That's coming from you. That means a huge amount. Thank you very much.
No, you're more than welcome. Well, I say it from the heart because I mean it. So it's so important, and these conversations are really important too. And the conversations and the stories. Your journey continues. It's not finished. So we keep going, and who knows what tomorrow is going to bring us. And for anybody that is listening or watching, please, I hope you feel okay with what Holly's shared. I'm hoping everybody's doing okay. And if you do need extra help or support, so always know you are not alone. That is the most important message we want to send through this, is in those moments when we're struggling, when we feel that we've, nowhere to turn to, there is always somebody to turn to. So please do always know that. Samaritans, I always talk about just as Samaritans as a closing in this. Samaritans exist to help support conversations about anything. It's not just about suicidal thoughts or crisis. It can be about anything that you're struggling with in your life. Any moments in your life you just need a safe space to talk about something you don't feel like you can talk to a friend or family member. Please do pick up the phone. Samaritans 116123 is the number. If you don't want to phone somebody, why don't you drop a message to Shell 85258? And there are many other organizations out there as well, and I just wish I could list every single one of them for you, but you can find them, no doubt. But Holly, thank you so much. I want to wish you and Welly life, I love that,
Thank you.
Welly life, all the very best for the future. You're going to have an amazing journey, and of course you're already covered in rainbows, so it's perfect.
Thank
Way
you
to
so
end.
much. It's been
But,
lovely to see you again, and
oh,
I hope that we get to do it in person in time.
100%. Only we can make that happen, so we will make that happen, right? So lovely to see you, and I look after yourself, and I'll speak to you soon.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.